You could smell three things on the private training range that day: burnt gunpowder, testosterone, and expensive cologne. It was the smell of men who thought their high-end gear and weekend warrior confidence made them truly dangerous. And right in the middle of their little circle of judgment stood Maya. Her presence alone was unusual, but in their eyes her equipment was a flat-out joke. "You have got to be kidding me," a voice boomed, dripping with condescension. "We'll call him Chad." He was built like a vending machine and wearing thousands of dollars in brand new gear. He jabbed a thick finger in her direction. "What is that, a toy? Did you pick that up at a surplus store?" A wave of snickers went through the dozen or so other shooters. They'd all paid a hefty price for an advanced tactical carbine course, buying a ticket to feel like a Tier 1 operator for a weekend. They glanced at Maya's rifle, then back at their own pristine, tricked-out firearms, and just saw more proof of their own superiority. Her rifle was worn, the finish rubbed thin in places from real use, not neglect. And the setup, it was just weird. Unconventional. It definitely wasn't something they'd seen on Instagram. Off to the side, leaning against a barricade with his arms crossed, was the instructor, Kane. His face was a roadmap of hard-earned wrinkles and quiet observation. As an ex-Special Forces operator with more real-world deployments than all the students' ages combined, he saw everything and said nothing. He watched the group size her up, his eyes lingering on her rifle, not with ridicule, but with a flicker of something else. Something none of them could read. The jokes kept coming, a low buzz of insults, but Maya didn't even seem to notice. She just stood there, her focus locked on the targets 50 yards away, her expression just as calm and unreadable as Kane's. This wasn't a beginner's course. The price tag and prerequisites made sure everyone here knew their way around a rifle. They were cops, competitive shooters, and rich hobbyists who'd mastered the basics and now wanted to learn the deadly dance of dynamic shooting from a guy who had lived it. They showed up with rifles that were practically ads for the firearms industry, sleek, black, and loaded with every attachment you could imagine. Lasers, lights, vertical grips, and optics that cost more than a used car. And then there was Maya's rifle. It was a simple, battle-proven AR-15, but the way she had it set up is what drew their scorn. It didn't have the trendy, free-floating M-LOK handguard everyone else had. Instead, it just had a standard, functional one. Her main optic was mounted on a high riser, putting it way above the barrel, something the gearheads considered a rookie mistake. Right next to it, she had a small red dot sight, canted at a 45-degree angle, but the weirdest thing, at least to them, was her sling. It was a simple two-point sling, but she had it wrapped around her support arm and cinched down tight. It looked clumsy, almost like it would trap her. Chad leaned over to his buddy, a former cop. "Look at that sling. She's going to get tangled in that the second she tries to move. That's a liability." His friend nodded. "And that high mount? She'll never get a consistent cheek weld. Her height over bore is a nightmare. She'll be shooting over the target's head up close." Their whispers were like a toxic cloud, but Maya seemed to be breathing different air. She was methodically checking her gear, seating magazines into worn pouches placed high on her belt, perfectly set for her left hand. Her movements were clean and precise, with zero wasted motion. She wasn't looking at them. She wasn't acknowledging they even existed. There was only her tools, and the job ahead. Kane finally pushed himself off the barricade, and the chatter died instantly. His presence just had that effect. He didn't need to shout. His voice was gravelly and quiet, but it cut through the air with absolute authority. "All right, listen up," he started, his eyes scanning the line. "This isn't about looking cool. It's about being efficient. Efficient is smooth, and smooth is fast. We start with the fundamentals. Simple cold bore drill. 5 rounds, 50 yards. I want to see what you've got before the adrenaline starts pumping." Shooters, make ready. A chorus of clicks and clacks filled the air as bolts slid home. Chad shot a final, smug smirk at Maya. "Let's see what that museum piece can do," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. She didn't flinch. She just brought her rifle up, the stock settling against her shoulder like it was born there, and waited for the command. "Threat." Kane's voice cut through the air. The range exploded. The sound of a dozen rifles firing at once was a deafening roar echoing off the backstop. Chad's rifle barked, its expensive muzzle brake doing little to hide his rushed, aggressive shots. He was fast, sure, but speed without accuracy is just making noise. The other shooters were pretty much the same, a blur of motion and flying brass, and then there was Maya. Her rifle's report was sharp and crisp, but you could hear it separately from the others. She wasn't just dumping rounds downrange. It was a steady, rhythmic cadence. Pop, 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 pop. 5 shots, delivered with the consistency of a heartbeat. Even her stance was different. The others stood mostly upright, like they were at a square range. Maya was coiled, athletic, with her knees bent and weight forward. It was a fighter's stance, built for stability and movement, not for standing still. Cease fire. Clear and show safe. Kane commanded. As they cleared their weapons, the self-congratulatory buzz started right back up. Chad was already bragging about his grouping as they walked down to check their targets. Their results were fine. Most had put 5 shots in the center mass ring, a spread about the size of a dinner plate. Chad's was a bit tighter, maybe the size of a grapefruit. Respectable, but nothing to write home about. He was clapping his buddy on the back when they all saw Maya's target. The group went silent. One by one, the talking stopped and they just stared. In the dead center of her target, where the X should have been, there was just a single, ragged hole. It was a cloverleaf group. All 5 shots had overlapped so perfectly it looked like one jagged puncture. It wasn't the size of a grapefruit or even a golf ball. It was the size of a quarter. The silence was thick with disbelief. This wasn't just good shooting. This was machine-like perfection. This was a level of pure marksmanship that none of them, with all their fancy gear, could hope to match. Chad was the first to speak, his voice tight with jealousy. He tried to pass off as doubt. That's a lucky group, he stammered. Anyone can get lucky standing still. Let's see what happens when we actually have to move. But the seed was planted. Their mockery was built on the idea that she was incompetent. What they had just seen was the first sign that their entire judgment was completely wrong. As they walked back to the firing line, Kane passed Maya. He didn't say a word. He just glanced at her target, then at her, and gave a slow, almost invisible nod. A silent acknowledgement. They saw a fluke. He saw a foundation of absolute mastery. The group's earlier confidence was gone, replaced by a tense curiosity. They still thought her gear was a joke, but her shooting was undeniably serious. Now, they were waiting to see if her perfect accuracy was just a one-trick pony. They didn't have to wait long. Kane gathered them again. Standing still gets you killed, he said flatly. Combat is chaos. It's movement. If you can't put accurate rounds on target while you're moving, you're a liability. Next drill is simple. Start at the 25. On my command, advance and engage 3 separate steel plates. Maintain a high ready when not firing. Chad, of course, had one. Instructor, high ready? My local matches penalize for that. Low ready is safer for range work. Kane's gaze went ice cold. He didn't raise his voice. This is not a local match, he said, letting the words hang in the air. This is my range. You will do it my way or you will find the gate. High ready gives you better weapon retention and a faster shot. If you think it's just for clearing rooms, you've been taught wrong. Get on the line. Chad's face turned red, but he kept his mouth shut. The first group of shooters took their positions. At the beep, they lurched forward, and the difference between theory and practice became painfully clear. Their movements were jerky. They bounced as they walked, swaying their rifles all over the place. The satisfying ping of lead hitting steel was rare, mostly replaced by the dull thud of misses hitting the dirt. Then, it was Maya's turn. She stepped to the line, her rifle held in that peculiar high ready, tight to her body. From the moment the timer beeped, she was pure fluid motion. She didn't walk, she glided. Her knees were bent in that same athletic crouch, her core locked, letting her upper body float forward as if on rails. Her head and her optic remained perfectly level. Suddenly, her bizarre sling made sense. It wasn't a liability. It was an anchor. The tension pulled the rifle into her shoulder, making it a rock-solid extension of her body. She brought the rifle to bear. Ping! The first plate rang out. She didn't drop the rifle. She kept it in her workspace, her eyes already finding the next target. Ping! The second target shuddered. She kept advancing, smooth and relentless. Ping! The third plate sang its song. She reached the 10-yard line and stopped. 3 targets, 3 hits, all while in constant motion. She made it look effortless. She made it look like breathing. The range was dead silent. The other shooters weren't snickering anymore. They were just staring, their minds trying to process what they'd just seen. Her technique was all wrong, according to their gospel of YouTube and competition rules. Her stance, her carry, her sling, it was all alien. And yet, the results were undeniable and just better. Chad stood there with his mouth hanging open, his expensive rifle suddenly feeling heavy and useless. Kane watched from the side. This time, a genuine, small smile touched the corner of his mouth. He'd seen past the gear from the very beginning. He hadn't seen a girl with a weird rifle. He had seen a warrior, and he knew the final test was about to shatter the reality of every other person on that range. The sun beat down on the now humbled group. The mood had shifted from arrogance to a tense, almost fearful respect. Maya was no longer the joke. She was an enigma. Kane called them for the final drill. "This is a stress test," he announced. "It's designed to push you to your breaking point. Simulate the chaos of a real fight. You'll move through a course, engage multiple targets, and conduct a slide lock reload under pressure. Then, you'll transition to your sidearm for the final target. Your score is your time, but every miss adds 5 seconds. This," he said, his gaze sweeping over them, "separates the shooters from the operators. One by one, they tried. And one by one, the pressure broke them. They fumbled their reloads, hands shaking. They yanked triggers, sending rounds into the dirt. Their transitions to pistol were a clumsy scramble. They were filled with frustrated sighs and penalty calls. Finally, Maya stepped up. A hush fell over the range. Every single eye was on her. This was it. The timer beeped. Maya didn't just move. She exploded. She flowed through the course with a predatory grace, putting controlled pairs into each target. Pop, 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 pop. She moved from cover to cover, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Her rifle ran dry. Clack. The bolt locked to the rear. There was no hesitation, no panic. As she kept moving to cover, her left hand shot to her belt. Her eyes stayed up, scanning for threats. The empty mag dropped free as a fresh one was already on its way, guided home by pure muscle memory. Her thumb hit the bolt release thwack and the rifle was live again. The entire reload took less than a second and a half. A blur of pure efficiency. She re-engaged, then holstered her rifle on the move. The sling everyone mocked now made perfect sense, holding the rifle securely against her body, but out of the way. In one fluid motion, her hand was on her pistol. She drew, presented, and fired twice. Ping, ping. She finished. The timer stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Her time wasn't just good. It was faster than Kane's own demonstration run. 0 misses. Perfect execution. Chad stood there, his face pale. The illusion he had of himself hadn't just been cracked. It had been atomized. He looked from Maya to Kane, searching for an explanation for the impossible. Kane walked slowly toward him. His eyes still on Maya, he stopped beside the dumbfounded shooter and leaned in. His voice, a low, confidential whisper, "You're all wondering how." Kane murmured, "You look at her setup, and you see wrong. I look at it, and I see purpose built." He paused. The high mount for aiming with night vision. The sling technique for stability and weapon retention while clearing rooms. The aggressive economy of motion. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near-reverent whisper that shattered Chad's entire world. "You guys don't know what you're looking at. Only Rangers train like that." The word just hung in the air. Rangers. It wasn't just a name. It was a standard. It spoke of a brutal selection process and a level of training that existed on a different planet from their weekend courses. All the mockery and arrogant smirks evaporated, replaced by a wave of stunned, humbling awe. The men looked at Maya, who was now quietly loading her spent magazines, completely focused, as if she hadn't just sent a shockwave through their entire group. They didn't see a young woman with a strange rifle anymore. They saw a quiet professional, a member of one of the planet's most elite units. Her gear wasn't weird. It was optimized for a world they could only pretend to understand. The techniques she used weren't wrong. They were hallmarks of a philosophy perfected in the most demanding environments on Earth. She finished her work and finally looked up, her eyes meeting Kane's. He didn't smile. He gave her a full, crisp, respectful nod and acknowledgement from one warrior to another. She returned it with a small nod of her own. In a world full of loud talkers and flashy gear, competence is the only language that really matters. And she had just spoken volumes without saying a word. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more. Now, I gotta ask you, what was the most impressive part for you? The quarter-sized group, the sub-2-second reload on the move, or that final, epic reveal? Drop a comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching.